it's old, right? It's old from Africa, where you live in a village, and the village, everybody in the village is not individuals. You're one organism. Every member of the village have some job to do. Whether you're a farmer, you guard the cattle, you make pottery, whatever it is, right? But it all benefits the entire community. Baltimore is one of the few cities that I've actually seen that doesn't do it in silos, but people actually get together and say, hey, let's collaborate. That word, I've always known that word, but it's become more frequently spoken out of my mouth and the mouth of a lot of people that I'm around here in Baltimore.
We believe that anyone, anywhere can make startups. After spending more than a decade building our own company, we've learned a ton. We've mentored founders and built startup communities. We've helped craft government policies, and we've also invested in businesses, some that succeeded and some that didn't. We've helped thousands of startup founders, funders, and facilitators. We're inspired by their dreams and determination. Our goal is to travel across America and meet as many as we can, tell their story, and share their lessons. We're on a mission to help you succeed, to show you that you aren't crazy, you aren't alone, you really can do this. We're here to make startups together.
My name is Dwight Campbell. I am Jamaican by birth. I am a chef before I knew I was a chef. My company is called Cajou Creamery. We are the first and only plant-based company ice cream company on the East Coast. As far as I know, we're the only Black family-owned cashew milk ice cream company in the country.
On the planet.
We are in Baltimore City, a city that we chose. It wasn't a necessity. It was intentional. Because Baltimore has a huge, entrepreneurial community ecosystem, a plant-based system, a vegan system, and people that don't follow the status quo.
That's great. That's great. Tell me about your neighborhood here. Tell me about
We are in Mount Vernon, one of the oldest neighborhoods in Baltimore City. We are a port city, so this is one of the first neighborhoods that was built. A lot of the buildings here are probably back into the 1800s. This is called Market Center, also called the Bromo Art District. U.B. Blake's museum is up the road. This is where the first big box clothing stores were in Baltimore.
Oh, wow.
I have a lot of neighbors during the 80s that tell me that when they used to shine their shoes to come to go shopping down here. And it was a thing, Yeah. The hats and the gloves and all of it, right? And it was also one of the epicenters of Baltimore's Black business community. Until the powers that be, the big box companies, decided to defund it. And everything went to crap, right? They put in a railway system because the people that used to live down here moved further north and no longer wanted to drive to the city to get to the highway or the MARC train to go into DC or the Amtrak to go Philly, New York, wherever. So they put in the light rail. Light rail killed all the businesses on the street, Howard Street. Howard Street was like Broadway.
Yeah.
There are theaters, live performance theaters. There's arenas at the end of this street. Not you got to veer off anywhere at the end on this street, right?
Yeah.
So this was it. This was the place where people came for restaurants. There were jewelry stores, craftsmen, artists, all up and down here.
Yeah, we drove here up Howard.
Yeah.
And I was amazed at the two things in stark contrast to each other. Obvious, rich architecture and obvious vacancy. And I see you on this street, and I imagine foot traffic's probably really important for you, and maybe you're really just one of the pioneers bringing foot traffic back to it. But how is it operating a brick and mortar on this street, and what does it look like for you to repopulate Howard?
I would like to say, first of all, it's not just me. There are 5 black businesses on this block. Some of them have predated me. The Cultural Arts Center has been here for years, right? Dom next door opened 3 months. Vegan Juiceology opened 3 months before me. Couples Tea and I, and Vinyl Pages, which they own as well, we got these storefronts at the same time. It took us a little quicker to build out. They opened 3 months later. But it's a Cohado effort.
Great.
It is absolutely a Cohado. Because if we were here by ourselves, we would not have succeeded. Well,
How does Cohado play into that?
you don't stop playing the game until everyone wins. Everything that you do in your business might be to benefit you, but you also know that it is benefiting everybody else on the block because you're bringing attention to the block. We have become a destination. We have people that drive as far as, I had a gentleman that drove 2 hours from Pennsylvania yesterday, and he does it every weekend. I have people that drive from Richmond, Virginia. The lady comes and she brings her cooler and she buys 14, 15 pints of ice cream. She stocks it up. She gets a cone to go and she says, I'll see you next month.
How well would this work without the Cohado approach?
It wouldn't, because we'd be by ourselves and we'd be an island in an ocean of capitalism that's not beneficial to small entrepreneurs, small businesses, black and women owned businesses. It's not cohesive to it. It doesn't work for us unless you have money behind you. If you're starting this out with the money that you save from a 9-to-5 job, good luck.
Well, maybe that brings us to the other part, because we're on this tour, getting to know the people that support and build the entrepreneur community and try to bring everybody together to make this sort of change, as well as the founders that they've supported. And I'm wondering if you could tell us how you met Paolo and what that changed for you.
Paolo walked up to me at a farmer's market 3 months after I moved to Baltimore. It was the second farmer's market that we ever did. And he said, hey brother, what you got there? And I said, cashew milk ice cream. And he's like, let me try some. And he chose a flavor, and he chose a sweet potato pie. And he's like, I'll take a pint. And at that point, I thought he was going to walk away. And he's like, all right, no sale, cool. But he proceeded to ask me, where you from? And we got into a conversation. And next thing we know, the pint's finished, and we're 2.5 hours into the conversation. And at the end of the conversation, he said to me, which was very profound, because I at this point in time when I'm moving here, I had known a lot of people. And when he said, we're going to know each other a long time, it resonated. And spiritually, I realized that I've known him already for a long time, you know, and he's the big brother I never had, you know.
Could you help us understand the impacts of his work in Baltimore?
That goes back to the Cohado, the sense of community, and the fact that it's old, right? It's old from Africa, where you live in a village, and the village, everybody in the village is not individuals. You're one organism. Every member of the village have some job to do. Whether you're a farmer, you guard the cattle, you make pottery, whatever it is, right? But it all benefits the entire community. Baltimore is one of the few cities that I've actually seen that doesn't do it in silos, but people actually get together and say, hey, let's collaborate. You know, that word, I've always known that word, but it's become more frequently spoken out of my mouth and the mouth of a lot of people that I'm around here in Baltimore. And I'll tell you a really short story. When Paolo started the Black Butterfly Network, and he came to me and he said, I want you to be in the first cohort. And the cohort does not have any infrastructure. It's up to you guys to create the infrastructure for all the other cohorts. So he was very intentional about the businesses that he chose. At the end of that spiritual cohort, because there's no other way, we cried, we laughed, we ate, we talked about our businesses, we gave each other suggestions, we offered our help to each other, and we still do, right? At the end of that cohort, we got this space. After about a few months, we were, and this is the collaboration part, right? A gentleman by the name of Aaron has a podcast called No Picks After Dark. And at the end of every podcast, for a couple of weeks, he kept saying, and big up the Cajou Creamery. So one of his friends called him and said, who's this Cajou Creamery? And he's like, well, if you don't know, you better ask somebody. And unbeknownst to me, his friend was a buyer, Kevin, from Whole Foods. Kevin walked in here one day and was like, hey, can you do a tasting? And I'm sure, yeah, sure. What's the event? And he goes, oh, I should have led with, I'm from Whole Foods. And it was like, absolutely. He says, when can you do it? I said, tomorrow. As a matter of fact, right now. He's like, tomorrow's fine. And we walked in, we met the GM, which was a African-American Jamaican lady. And I don't know how, but she picked up my accent. She's like, you from Jamaica? I was like, yeah. She's like, what?
That's awesome.
And we're waiting for the corporate chef. And everybody tasted it. They all loved it, right? And the corporate chef walked in. He picked up the horchata ice cream. He took a spoonful. And he looked at the label. He looked at the nutritional facts. And he said, does anybody else want any more of this? And he walked out the room. And Kim said, let's start the paperwork.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But the Cohado effect also is the fact that when we did get into Whole Foods, Kim made sure that every single Whole Foods and the ones that were opening would have us here in Baltimore. Mm-hmm. She literally called them and said, you need to. So we opened on a Thursday in Harbor East. And by the following week, we were in Mount Washington Whole Foods and Towson. which had just opened that weekend. And Kim pushed it, right? Backtrack a little bit. When Whole Foods first sent me their order, and this is where the Cohado effect comes in, and the Black Butterfly Network. When you fill out the application, they ask you how much can you produce, da-da-da-da. Gave them amount that I could do. They sent me a purchase order for 4 times what I can produce. Now, just think about for a second what that means to a small business who's been trying to get on the big stage. And then they give you something that you think is going to buckle your knees. And you might have to say no and pass. And I'm freaking out for days. And I called Paolo. And he's like, what the hell are you doing? Put it on the thread. It took a matter of minutes. Actually, let me back up because I'm cutting out part of the story. He took me around to several chefs that he knew that had freezers, but they couldn't do it, right? They couldn't hold the amount that I needed to hold. It was almost 400 cases. So that's when he said, let's just put it on the thread. And it took a matter of minutes. And Ice Queens, which was in the first cohort with us, it was Deja and her mother, Melanie. They're in Locust Point here in Baltimore. They're like, we got a freezer. We're not using it till July. You can use it. And they let me use that. And that was February. And they let me use it a whole time at no charge.
So it was like rocket fuel, right? Because you went from this idea, this dream.
I went from making 20 cases.
Right.
Yeah.
And the amplification of you, your brand, your business, the optics of what it is that you're doing, getting into Whole Foods organically through this podcast friend, like that's such a full circle moment.
Yes.
Right? Because
absolutely.
you weren't strategic about like, okay, I'm gonna do this thing and then this thing's gonna happen. And like that's kind of where the Cohado, like you said, absolutely. Universe presents itself.
Yes.
And it was an opportunity for you that you sort of looked at through this lens of like, whoa.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I'm in.
And this was a way. One of the reasons why Paolo and I became such good friends, because I didn't have a terminology for how I thought. But how he thinks and how I think clicked. Because I've always thought this way. I've always thought. It's just frustrating to me that the rest of the world doesn't think this way. And how much easier and how much more problems would be solved if more brain matter was put to individual problems.
Or more brain matter was just ignored.
There's that too.
Yeah.
So,
well, the more you have, then the ones that don't work will be either realigned or put to a different task. Right?
So I'm curious, now that you've got Whole Foods, sounds like
this is the first step.
Well, my question in it is, one could make the argument that you could just focus on that and do okay. So why do you still have a storefront right here on the street?
That's a good question. That is a good question. It's a very good question. Community. One word. This community doesn't have anything like this. Before we moved to this block, it did not. There was this, Baltimore has a lot of food halls.
Yeah.
They're loud. And sometimes just want some quiet space. And I have a lot of customers that come, they buy a scoop, they open their book and they sit there for half an hour and they read and have a scoop of ice cream. And we are intentional about always having a community space for it. Because, one person can't sell enough ice cream to keep everything running and run a family of four, right? So me showing up here when we're open and having the place set up for the community is showing my love for this community. It's showing my love for humanity, that we need spaces like this. We need spaces where people can come and meet somebody that you don't know and have a conversation and become friends. Internet and technology is awesome, but it's dulling some of our senses. And the natural sense of connecting with people, when you can feel someone's energy and you can know, I like this person, I'm going to stay seated here and we're going to have a conversation. You ask the person where you're from and, you start there. A lot of us have lost that, and I want to make that accessible, because it was about 3 months ago, and it was pouring rain and ice cold outside. But I had 12 people in the shop.
There's not that much square footage here for 12 people.
No, and we pulled in the chairs, and they said, because nobody else was coming in, right? It was like the end of the night, and we pulled in the chairs. They helped me pull in chairs, and we sat around. We talked till like 9, 10 o'clock at night. I'm closed from 6, right? We had a research scientist. We had a teacher that stopped being a professor to become an elementary school teacher, because he studied behavioral science in the young adolescents, and he decided to go back to elementary school to teach the kids because of what he knows now, right? We had an author, a filmmaker, and a lady. She said she's in accounting for the federal government. But we sat here, and except for the couple, the research scientist and the teacher, nobody knew each other. They all knew me, and they knew the ice cream, but that's what brought them together. And since that, they've all met back here. Yeah. And that alone for me is worth it. Mm-hmm. Because they were everything that they were doing was invested into humanity and the community, And if I made a connection, it's awesome.
I don't want to ask the question
now. I have one question, then you can ask the question. So as Eric said, we're doing this roadshow. We're meeting in 24 cities this year. We're meeting with the Entrepreneur Support Organization, so people like Paolo, and the connections that him and his organizations make. So you've obviously shared with us the Butterfly group, and what does that look like for your business? And one of the also recurring things that we see is that is an example to us of sort of like the social capital network that exists. Like your business is elevated because of that. There's financial capital. At the end of the day, getting access to money. What does that look like financially? Whether it's the friends and family, the credit card, the VC, the angel. There's also an injustice that exists in who gets access to that capital, and what does that look like? And so my question for you is, should you have an opportunity, let's say in the magic wand of the world, access to, let's say, $100,000 to do something either with your business or with your community or with your product, what kind of difference would that kind of capital make for you and what it is that you do?
That's a poignant and timely question, because when we first opened this, we did not know how we were going to get to Whole Foods and the 300 stores that we're in now.
300 stores.
We want to go national, but we don't want it to be extractive. We are trying our best not to go the traditional route where you give somebody a third of your company that you blood, sweat, and tears is in, and your kids, my kids work here through the summer, right? The whole family works here. That is very valuable to me. That is valuable enough for me to turn down Shark Tank twice. I don't want somebody to say, I'll give you all the money you want. You just have to give me half your company. I'm sorry, no. I'll keep taking the small steps. I am happy that capital is being more accessible for small businesses. It's not accessible enough. I think they need to remove the paperwork out of it and put more of a human touch on it. Get the websites and the forms and applications out and meet people on a personal level where you can actually see what they're doing. And you can meet some of the people that they have, that has enriched their lives and they have enriched theirs, right? We are struggling with that right now. Venture capitalists or big bank, right? Fortunately for us, the big bank that's here is very much willing and trying their best to put that human touch back on. They're very personable. I know the vice president of the bank that I'm talking to. She's had my ice cream. She's been to my shop. You know, I know her partner in business, her counterpart, Jim Peterson, who I see around Baltimore. He goes to small business events and networks and talk to people and say, you know, hand them your card and say, if you ever want to just have a conversation, call me. You know, not a lot of people doing that. When we started this, looking through, I felt like I was looking through crushed velvet, trying to see where the capital was. We have created, I think, enough social capital where that crushed velvet is more like a gauze now. Okay. But it's still, you can only make out an outline. You can see where you want to go, but you can't see the details of how to get there. Yeah. Right? That's a position we're in right now. And we're trying to figure it out. And we're going to take our steps, you know, if they need to be half steps to figure it out, and we'll do so. Because the reason why we started this, the primary reason why we started this was our two sons. Mm-hmm. I have two young black boys. In this world, I spent my teenage years in New York. When I was in high school in Flushing, a teacher told me that the average age for a black male was 20 years old. And then you're either killed or you're incarcerated. I'm 55. I have a 17-year-old that's about to hit that 20-year-old mark. I'm very conscious of it. It's something that's stuck in my head. And she was a Caucasian lady that told me this. Pissed my mom off. But I told my mom, I'd rather know that there's statistics out there like this and know them than not know them. Right? That people actually think this way. It refines your thinking and how you calibrate what your acts are. To the capital, back to the capital. I want to be a billionaire so that I can help other entrepreneurs. That's what I want. I want my kids and my grandkids and my great grandkids and my great great grandkids to do the same thing that I did for other entrepreneurs. I want to instill in them that you're never alone. All you have to do is be courageous enough to ask for help or advice. Because that's what we have to do. Yeah.
I'm actually going to ask a different question than what I was going to ask, which is what would capital look like in the Cohado way?
I've never thought about that question before. But here's my off from the hip answer to that. And this is out of body, out of me, right? Me not being the owner of Cajou. I would fund a company like Cajou that I know that will put in their mandate funding other companies and not acquiring other companies, because that's capitalism. You fund something to either make something from them or acquire them, right? I worked in New York, Wall Street, seen it happen, right? But the Cohado way would to be fund them just the same way you plant a rose bush, just to see it bloom, right? Because the more plants that are growing, the better your air quality is, the better your quality of life is going to be. The more companies that can get to the level of being able to fund other companies, the more jobs, the more generational wealth, the more people that stop looking day to day, check to check, but actually start thinking about their future and dreaming. Dreaming is a big part of being human. You don't see, or you can't imagine where you're going to go if you can't dream. You know?
Yeah. Last night I woke up in the middle of the night, and this is totally off script for anything that we do. And it just, the thought had occurred to me, and I had to write it down, that in what I do, that every day people invite me into their dream and I get to help them bring it into reality. And so you saying that was timely for me in my own life and my own journey.
Right, absolutely. And that is the universe, right? There's a plan here, but there's so many dimensions of it on top of dimensions. Each dimension has its own dimensions that we will never figure it out, but you have to dream. You have to know that there's a reason. There's a reason for stuff happening. Right. Maybe it's if it's something bad, maybe it's for you to take stock of what you're doing and slow down, stop, breathe, look, pay attention.
Well, just to wrap up, I know that we can definitely get your ice cream at Whole Foods, but if you want to just tell everybody how they can find you, whether it's at the physical shop or online or at a store near them.
Absolutely. So we're a Cajou Creamery, Black owned, Black family owned, plant-based ice cream company. All the ice creams are made with cashews. There is no artificial ingredients in it at all. We have about 9 ingredients in our ice cream. It starts with filtered water and raw cashews. We chose that because we give to you the same thing we give to our kids. You can find us in Whole Foods and 300 other stores through the Mid-Atlantic. Hopefully, we are going nationwide in about 2.5 months. We ship nationwide as well. You can go to our website, www.cajoucreamery.com. And you can find us here, 411 Howard Street, Baltimore City.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I appreciate you guys.